on, everybody, and happy MCU, happy the Falcon and Winter Soldier Friday to you all out there. Elliot back again from Movie Files, breaking down the latest episode 2 of the Falcon and Winter Soldier, which was titled The Star-Spangled Man. And man, this was a great episode of television, and we're going to break it all down in the spoiler discussion. Again, this is full spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, go check it out. You will not be disappointed. Then come back and join the conversation. But before we dive into the spoiler review, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you all are following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to this community. Consider subscribing to the channel, and while you all are at it, make sure you hit the notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It would mean the world to me if you all can like and share this spoiler review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, let's talk about this second episode. Let me know your thoughts on seeing Sam and Bucky in the show for the very first time. We get the end with Zemo coming into the mix, but even before that, we get the social commentary, we get the action, we get a little bit more of the Flag Smashers, we get a little bit more of John Walker's backstory, and we also meet, who I didn't expect to meet this early in the show, Isaiah Bradley. Let's talk about it all in the comments below, and let me know if you enjoyed this episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So before we get into my breakdown here, as you all may or may not know, but in the last few months, we've been doing a live stream every single Saturday here at Movie Files, 3 p.m. Central Time, and we're going to continue that live stream discussion with The Falcon and Winter Soldier. We're talking episode 2 live tomorrow, myself, my co-host Chris, and we always like to bring in some great special guests, and tomorrow's special guest returning to the show will be Tessa from Mama's Geekly, and we also coming to the show for the very first time, as well as the channel, we got Brandon from Just My Opinion. So again, myself, Chris, Brandon, and Tessa will be breaking down this episode, the scenes, the characters, the moments, the greater MCU, and the characters and how they're going to impact the MCU. It's always a great time. Again, tune in tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Time, here on this channel, live discussion about the second episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So let's get into this breakdown here. Again, my initial thoughts. I love the show, man. I love last week's premiere episode, and I love the second episode. Again, how the show handles the spectacle of the action sequences, but at the same time have the quieter moments with the characters, Sam, Bucky, John. We meet Isaiah Bradley, which I mentioned him last week. I was not expecting him to be implemented in the show this early, but we'll talk about him and his grandson Eli, and we'll talk about Lamar and Battlestar, and you know, we get more of the Flag Smashers, we get Zemo at the end. So I love the balance of the spectacle action, the social commentary, the world building, the introductions to new characters, and the themes that's going on with the show. This show is clicking on all cylinders for me, but again, let me know what you all thought of this second episode. So let's get into this breakdown here, starting off with the first scene, which is the thing I'm really enjoying about this show. It's the quieter moments. I love the action, don't get me wrong, but it's when we get into the headspace of these characters, as we are kind of getting a quieter moment with John Walker, aka U.S. Agent, aka the new Captain America, which, by the way, I loved all the memes last week of him in the suit, and the guy from Up, the grandpa from Up. All that stuff was fantastic. But we get Wyatt Russell as John Walker, quieter moment in the locker room as his, I believe, might be his high school sweetheart. He's kind of talking about their past in regards to how she used to come into the locker room to get them all kind of hyped up for the football game, but now the tables have somewhat turned because he's not playing football anymore. He's serving the shield. He is the new Captain America, as he talks about he wants to be this, you know, pay homage to Steve Rogers, but he wants to be his own man. He wants to be his own Captain America, and I love that quiet moment with him. Again, Wyatt Russell, the son of Kurt Russell, the charm, the charisma is there. I like Wyatt Russell. You know, I'm only seeing a handful of projects of his, you know, mostly 22 Jump Street, and then him in Overlord. I think he's a great actor, and I think I'm liking what we're getting with John Walker so far. But there's some things to look forward to with this character regarding experiments a little bit later. But as we get this opening scene, we get another introduction to a new character in regards to his buddy, his best friend in the comics, which we know as Lamar, aka Battlestar, as he's saying, you know, this is the job, man. This is what we signed up for, as we see John prepping to put on the suit. But this was a really cool moment here in regards to the parallels. I don't know if you guys noticed, but when we get John Walker going out to the crowd, you know, signing autographs, you know, kissing babies, taking pictures, all that stuff, it reminded me so much of Steve Rogers and the first Captain America, the first Avenger, with him going on those tours and celebrating and being on stage and doing the same thing, right? But obviously this is a modern take on that. So I love the parallels of the introduction to the Captain America to the world. But as we get this cool introduction to the MCU logo, which reminded me so much of Drumline, but we see him having this interview, and he has a pretty impressive resume, as they let us know that he has 3 medals of honor. He ran ran the RS-1. He's passed all the missions with, passing colors, but he doesn't have super strength. Now, guys, I want you to pay attention to that. He doesn't have super strength, but that's something to look forward to with John Walker, Battlestar, and maybe Eli Bradley. A little bit later, we'll dive into my theories in regards to predictions for the rest of the season. But as we kind of cut to, we see Bucky is watching all this go down, and he seems to be upset about the new Captain America. Which, speaking of Bucky, we cut to Sam seeing the Cap is back sign and all the promotions of the new Captain America, and we see him meeting with Torres, which we didn't get that much of Torres, but we did meet a lot more new characters, and I'm sure we'll get more Torres as the season goes by. But we get the moment of Sam and Bucky on screen together for the first time in this show, and their chemistry is just off the charts. But we see Sam having this conversation with Bucky as Bucky says to him, why did you give up the shield? As he says, Steve didn't want you to do that. Steve gave you the shield for a reason. We'll talk about Sam's reasons a little bit later, as we'll talk a little bit about, Bucky's resentment and kind of him being upset about Sam giving up the shield. But we get them, again, their chemistry back and forth is just so great. As Sam says, you didn't think it broke my heart to see, the new Captain America? That moment was great. But it's the funny moments, too, amongst these two that they're just so great together. From, them being, having the banter in Civil War, with them being in the car together, them fighting Spider-Man. Their chemistry is just so fantastic. As they kind of, we see Sam filling in Bucky on the Flag Smashers, and we get the funny moment, which we saw in the trailer or the clips they showed a couple weeks ago. Sam feels like this is part of the big three, as we know the big three being androids, aliens, and wizards, and we get the funny joke of Bucky talking about the Hobbit and all that stuff. Again, their chemistry is just ridiculous, and we see that Bucky wants to tag along, and on come the staring contest, which was a funny running joke throughout this episode. And I'm pretty sure we'll get more staring contests in the rest of the episodes. As we see Sam prepping for his mission, Bucky's like, hey, what's the plan, man? As we see Sam is just like, nah, I don't need to tell you anything about the plan. Again, they're back and forth is just fantastic. As we see them, Bucky, not having the parachute, not having the cool superhero landing as, Steve Rogers would have had, but he jumps out of the airplane and has his, I want to see that Wakanda arm come into action, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk about Bucky a little bit later in regards to what the hell, Bucky, like, why can't you get down like the Winter Soldier gets down, man, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat? But as I digress, again, we see their banter, their back and forth when they're on the ground, and, we see Sam poking fun of Bucky. You spend some time in Wakanda, you think you're all stealthy now, right? You think you're the White Panther. As Bucky corrects him, no, I'm the White Wolf, which if they play, which this is obviously a different origins from the White Wolf in the comics, but if they give us some White Wolf vibes and the Wakanda stuff that Bucky kind of went through, and again, what the heck is going on with that Wakanda arm? I'm pretty sure there's some cool tricks that he can do, some lasers, I don't know, man. I want to see that Wakanda arm in action a lot more. But as I digress, we get into the big action set piece this week, which there seems to be somewhat of a formula to the first two episodes. Action set piece, quieter moments, social commentary. It seems to be a little bit of a formula that's working for me so far, but there is a similar beat from this to the last week's episode. But we get to super speed. We see Sam and Bucky in action, which I love when we see the super soldiers, Sam, or I should say, Bucky, Steve Rogers, and when we saw, T'Challa in Infinity War, when they're doing the super run. I love those moments in the MCU. But we get to see the Flag Smashers in action, man. We get to see a group of Flag Smashers. I believe it was a total of 8 of them, which we'll talk about their leader here, kind of the bait and switch that we got last week. But we see that Bucky, once he hears there's a hostage in the holdings of the Flag Smashers, he jumps right into action. He jumps right into the back of the truck, which we find out that the Flag Smashers are taking on supplies and resources. We'll talk more about their philosophy and their thought process of, the government seems to care more about the people that were brought back from the blip versus the people that actually survived the blip. But we get this really cool moment of the action set piece, which I'm glad they didn't reveal this in the trailers that we saw for the last few months or over the last year. In that battle sequence on top of the trucks fighting, we get the new Captain America and his friend, Lamar, Battlestar, jumping into action, which I kind of love that moment that they didn't spoil that in the trailers. But in this moment that they're fighting, and by the way, like I said, man, I'm going to need Bucky to step his game up when it comes to action, because the Winter Soldier, I don't know, his mind has obviously been cleared of all the murders and the assassins. He's no longer the Winter Soldier. But does that mean that he's lost his hand-to-hand combat? Like, every time we see Bucky in action, he doesn't seem to be as badass as the Winter Soldier. I think of Infinity War, him just shooting his guns. It's like, I need Bucky to step into action. He has that Wakanda arm. What does that arm do? We didn't really get to see it because he's getting his ass kicked in the scene, by the way. But we see John Walker and Lamar come into the action. We see John Walker sling. I mean, he's handling that shield pretty well, I may say. But I love this kind of, again, I was talking about the parallels for Steve Rogers and John Walker with him saying hello to the people, very similar to the first Captain America. But was it me, or were you guys getting Age of Ultron vibes when he was fighting, the Flag Smashers, and seeing him fighting them and hanging on the truck? That reminded me so much of Age of Ultron, especially when see the leader of the Flag Smashers kick him off and he lands on the car. Very similar to shades of Age of Ultron. But again, we see Bucky telling Sam, we got some super soldiers, which I assume they were super soldiers, as I mentioned in my review last week. But cut to John, and again, the charisma of John Walker, the charisma of Wyatt Russell is so great, as he suggests to the crew, we need to work together, man. We got the super soldiers on board, and Bucky's not a fan of this idea because he's not a big fan of this new Captain America. But they eventually decide to hop on the truck and have this conversation about, okay, what's the plan? The super soldiers back. What are we going to do? As we kind of learn a little bit more about the government, man. The government's not only keeping tabs on Bucky being the Winter Soldier and him being pardoned, but they're keeping an eye on Sam, man. This is the second week that we've heard the government watching Sam in a particular way. So it's going to be really interesting to see, General Ross and the government keeping an eye on Sam. And some people mentioned in the comments last week, is the government trying to put a hit on Sam potentially? I don't know. That's a storyline to keep an eye on. But we get more of the world building as we kind of hear more about John Walker's missions, why he's been kind of assigned as his new Captain America to kind of keep things afloat regarding the people that has been taking resources like the Flag Smashers. Again, the government not necessarily helping people that have been, affected by people returning from the blip. So I kind of love, again, that world building of what the world looks like after Endgame, as we kind of get Lamar revealing to Bucky his code name, which is Battlestar, which immediately when Bucky hears that, he's like, get me out of this truck. I don't need any more of, Captain America and his best friend 2.0 here. So I kind of like that moment there. As we kind of get introduced to Karli Morgenthau, who is portrayed by Erin Kellyman. Now, you guys might remember Erin. She was in Solo. She's always on a mission, right? She always has a group of people that she's leading. But nonetheless, she is revealed to be the leaders of the Flag Smashers, which was kind of the bait and switch last week. We thought the guy that beat up Torres was the leader. But if you guys followed the trailers and followed kind of the behind the scenes, I already knew that she was going to be the lead. It's a gender swap. In the comics, I believe the character Flag Smasher is just one singular person that creates this group. I believe he goes by the name of Karl. So they're doing a gender swap in this particular position. As we see, they go to this kind of hideout spot, and a lot of people that survive the blip consider the Flag Smashers a kind of a Robin Hood-ish type of character, where they're, doing some criminal things, but they're doing it to help people out. They're not getting help from the government. So I love, again, the kind of the layering out these villains. They're not just villains just to be villains. They have a purpose. They have a goal. But I do have an issue with these villains. I don't know if it's just the way that they're portraying the Flag Smashers. They don't seem as, again, they're not just straight up villains, but they don't have that villainous side to kind of match that persona of the mask and what they stand for. So we'll see. I'm going to have to grow on the Flag Smashers, because if I'm being honest, I don't find them to be too appealing thus far. I like the actress Erin, who's portraying the leader, and hopefully we'll learn more about other characters in the Flag Smashers. But right now I'm kind of on the fence about the portrayal of these potentially the through line, the main villains of the show, before we get to my boy Zemo. But cut to Bucky and Sam. Happened the last time, because Bucky's like, we need to get the shield back, Sam. And he's like, remember the last time we did that? Civil War. Me and Sam and Natasha, we were on the run for 2 years, Bucky. So we're not just gonna steal this from the government. And I love, as we kind of transition to Bucky saying, I want to introduce you to someone, which we'll get into here in a bit. But I love the joke in regards to, oh, look, it's the Black Falcon. And I love that Sam says, is it because I'm black? Because if that's the case, would I call you Black Kid? Again, I'm loving the subtlety of the jokes in this show thus far. But this is where we get a little bit more serious. Again, we get the action, we get the jokes, we get the chemistry, the banter, the back and forth between Sam and Bucky and all that stuff. But then we get a little bit more serious, right? The social commentary as we are introduced to, again, I was not expecting to get this character so early, but we get Isaiah Bradley, which we get the origin somewhat of his character in the show, but in the comics there's a lot more layers, and we might get that in this show and maybe in future movies of the MCU. There's a lot going on with Isaiah Bradley, guys. I mean, him being experimented on, him being forgotten about in history, being the first Captain America. There's a lot to be said about the parallels of the show's version of how the government and the history of the first Black Captain America has been swept under the rug, paralleling to America of a lot of stuff that they just, people just don't learn about in school, that they don't want to talk about in modern history. So there's a lot of parallels going on there. But before we actually meet Isaiah Bradley, it's important to know that we first meet his grandson, Eli Bradley, who is the Patriot in the comics, aka associated with the Young Avengers. Again, we got to remember what WandaVision did, introducing us to the twins, and now we get another potential Young Avenger being introduced in Isaiah grandson, Eli, as we'll potentially see him maybe get experimented on and becoming the Patriot. So that's something to keep an eye out on. But I'm loving Karl Lumley, who plays Isaiah. The line delivery, you can tell that there's the pain that he's went through as he kind of talks about, when him and Bucky encountered each other in 1951, and he kicked Bucky's ass and took half his arm, and the arm's growing back, and he just wants to kind of see Bucky in regards to that arm growing back. So I love that kind of back and forth between those two characters. But then we get this emotional beats that we got last week with the whole bank sequence and all that stuff with Sarah and Sam. But we hear his pain, his trauma, what he's went through. He was in jail for 30 years. Now, exploring that in the show, I hope we kind of learn why they put him in jail, but we kind of learn what was done to him in jail in those 30 years and how the super soldiers could have been brought back to the forefront regarding to him being tested on, them taking his blood while he was in jail. That's a lot of stuff there that man has went through as he tells Bucky and Sam, get out of my house, as you see him throw, I don't know what that was, but you still see, he still has his, his super serum inside of him, which I would imagine, old Cap might have a little bit of, a little 1-2 punch still in him because he still has that serum inside of him. But this next scene here, I love how they follow this scene up with this scene here, which let's talk about it, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is going to ruffle some feathers regarding this next sequence as the MCU, as Disney is tackling some social commentary. As we see Sam and Bucky talking in the street, Sam is clearly upset. Like, why the hell haven't you told me about, Isaiah? Did Steve know about this? As Bucky says, no, I didn't tell Steve. And we learn out why, because, he feels like Isaiah has went through enough, right? And that trauma that he's went through. But we have this conversation about Sam's like, why haven't you told me the first Captain America was black? He was the first black super soldier. We get the cops that pull up. And again, let's talk about it, right? We see in this scene, the cops pull up and they talk to Bucky. They talk to, Bucky Barnes. Sir, are you okay? Is this man bothering you? And Sam's like, we're just having a conversation, man. Sir, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him. Now, again, I know some people probably won't like this because they want to separate the reality of what goes on in the real world, and when they're watching the MCU, want to escape sci-fi, aliens, Thanos, all that stuff. But for me, this is what Captain America is all about, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't read a lot of Captain America comics. I'm familiar with the character, obviously, as we've gotten him in the MCU. But just looking at Captain America in the MCU, right, there's precedent for the political commentary with the Captain America character, as we see in the first Captain America movie, as we talk about one of the best MCU films to date, which is The Winter Soldier. Everyone refers to it as a, spy, thriller, espionage, political film. So Captain America and politics have always went hand in hand. So I'm loving that this show is tackling racism in the MCU, racism in America, discrimination in America, as we see the cops about to potentially arrest Sam, right? We all know what we all don't know. Some people ignore it, but being black in America isn't easy, ladies and gentlemen. As we see Sam and Bucky's like, do you know who this man is? And as the cop realizes, who these are Avengers, right? And they kind of, calm down or whatever the case may be. They arrest Bucky, which is very interesting in regards to how Isaiah was in jail for 30 years. Bucky has been a Winter Soldier for over 90 years and has never went to jail, right? Except for this moment that he's missed his parole, essentially his therapy sessions. But Very interesting scene. Again, I want to have the conversation in the comments, and let's be, appropriate, and let's not get too out of hand in regards to the comments. But I'm loving the social commentary that the show's having to offer, and I'm loving to see what the rest of the episodes have to offer in regards to the conversation. But again, I know there's some people, and it doesn't make you racist or discriminatory if you don't want to see or tackle those certain things. But I think it needs to be said. I think it's really important that the biggest company in the world is tackling these issues. The biggest IP in the world right now, and the MCU is tackling these issues. So I enjoyed it and liked how they handled that moment. And again, I'm excited to see what they have to say about the certain things, racism, discrimination, all that stuff within the MCU. So we're going to talk about it definitely more tomorrow. But again, let me know how you all liked or maybe didn't like that scene. Let's discuss in the comments. As we go back to the recap, we get Captain America saving Bucky, getting him out of jail, which it would have been interesting if Sam would have gotten arrested. I wonder if John would have gotten Sam out of jail, something to think about there. But we get the couples therapy scene, which was just hilarious, by the way. We get the eye glazing. We get a little bit more in depth. Once we get past the jokes, we get to hear Bucky's thoughts on regards to his resentment and his being mad at Sam regarding, why did you give up the shield? Steve believed in you, Sam, right? And he has that moment with him in regards to feeling like Sam made the wrong mistake. But I love how Sam kind of backs up and say, well, do you think that maybe you and Cap and Steve were wrong, and I made the right decision, as he talks about it. And I can't wait to get more of that, exploration and kind of that explanation of why he gave up the shield. But I love that moment that he kind of has there. But they come to somewhat of an agreement, like, you know what? Let's just band together, take out these flag smashers, and once this mission's done, me and you, we're done, which I don't think we're going to get them breaking up. They're going to be the best of friends by the end of this show. But wrapping up the episode here, we get John filling them in on and filling the audience in regards to the whereabouts of the flag smashers and how they have been able to kind of track them in regards to where they may or may not be. Sam brings up to John, we can't work together, man, because we're more free agents. We can get away with more stuff than you can because you're tied to the government. And we see John Walker says, well, yeah, all right, well, we can go our separate ways, but stay the hell out of my way. We'll see what comes of that relationship. But transitioning to, again, more of the flag smashers, which I'm not the biggest fans of. We get this sequence of the flag smashers taking their medicine to whoever they're going to drop it off to, but we get them getting interfered or intercepted by the power broker man. Now, we see one of the flag smashers sacrifice himself, and, the leader gets upset about that. But that scene was a little execution wasn't all that great for me because, again, the flag smashers are not really working for me entirely. But it's important to note that the power broker, if you guys aren't too familiar with that name, in the comics, that's associated to a Dr. Karl Malus, who, I don't know if you guys watch Jessica Jones, in particularly season 2, they introduce him because he's a mad scientist that experiments on people, and I'm sure he's going to make his way into the show because, again, he's tied to the power brokers. And as far as experiments go, there's a couple people that don't have super strength in this show, but they do in the comics. I'm looking at John Walker. I'm looking at Eli Bradley, and maybe some other people like Lamar, who's Battlestar in the comics, who was experimenting on. Maybe Sam might get experimented on. I don't know. That's something to keep an eye on in regards to the Karl Malus character, who is a mad scientist experimenting on people, giving them the super serum. So as we wrap up the episode, we see that Bucky wants to talk about the guy that knows a lot about Hydra. As we cut to this orchestra coming in, and he wants to meet with this guy, and the guy is revealed to be Zemo. End of the episode. I can't wait to get Zemo because, as you all may or may not know, he's one of my favorite villains in the MCU because, like Thanos, like Killmonger, he was able to accomplish his goal in splitting up the Avengers in Civil War, and I can't wait to see what he's been up to this whole time. So, again, I love the action in this episode. I love the human side of John Walker, meeting Lamar, meeting Eli, meeting Isaiah Bradley, as well as seeing Zemo coming at the end. Again, I think it's safe to say that we're going to get Karl as the scientist that's going to be experimenting on people. He's been distributing this super serum, and how some characters might be super soldiers by the end of the show and all that good stuff. But again, I love what the social commentary had to offer in this episode regarding, being black in America, and a scene that happens more than it should in regards to a white person and a black person having a conversation. Things might get a little bit hostile in regards to the conversation, and immediately the police officers go to the black man. So it's a lot to be said about this episode, and I really enjoyed it. And we will be continuing this conversation tomorrow tomorrow. Again, 3 p.m. Central Time, live here at Movie Files. Myself, my co-host Chris. We got Tessa from Mama's Geekly. We got Brandon from Just My Opinion, breaking down this episode more in depth and having a conversation with you all. So tune in tomorrow on the live stream. As always, make sure to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments about this episode, as well as your predictions for the weeks ahead. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. Hope you all are staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video.